this up too much, but in this story, a mob of zombies has attacked a small bank, and the group of humans who has managed to keep their heads, both literally and figuratively, have decided that they're going to hide in the vault. And so at this point, they just sealed the door. Kaveh was still pumping adrenaline from the firefight. They felt lightheaded. The vault was barely big enough to fit the four of them comfortably, but it wasn't filled with stacks of money as he had imagined. Instead, it was lined with hundreds of drawers of various sizes. As he caught his breath, he saw the severed arm that was left on the floor, and he noticed his own arm felt warm. He looked down. Blood was pouring through his left shoulder, soaking the inside of the sleeve. Kaveh showed Speedy, his friend. The two of them had worked together for 5 years, and the only people they knew in town were like them, immigrants. The rest of the town pretended they weren't there, and Speedy insisted they play along. True to form, Speedy shook his head quickly. Cúbralo. Kaveh knew he didn't need to cover it up. He needed to stop the bleeding and clean the wound. He started to peel back his suit jacket, cursing Speedy for making him wear his best clothes for the loan application. Speedy shook his head again and took off his own jacket. He draped it over Kaveh's arm just as Lisa turned around. "Can you help me with—" she started, but she must have seen something in their faces. "What's wrong?" Speedy looked around nervously in awkward silence. "Nothing," he finally said. Lying wasn't his strong suit. Speedy looked around Lisa pulled Speedy's jacket away, and Kaveh's arm clenched against the pain. "Get away from him," she said, but there was nowhere to go. Speedy shook his head, and Kaveh smiled at his friend's loyalty. "Do it now!" Her voice raised, and the noise bounced off the walls. Even she seemed surprised at her sudden volume. Speedy looked at Kaveh. Kaveh wanted to know what was going on, so he nodded to his sous chef to do as he was told. Speedy shuffled over to the other side of the tiny room next to the blonde who was still in shock. Lisa held out her hand. "Give me the gun." She spoke slowly, like she had during the loan application, as if Kaveh were stupid or didn't understand English. He didn't need to be a linguist to say, "No." She spoke even slower. "They bit you. You're gonna die. Then you'll be one of them." She pointed to the door. "A zombie." Kaveh followed her finger with his eyes, thinking carefully, but he didn't believe it. Things like that just didn't happen. He was really getting dizzy now. He couldn't stand up much longer. He leaned against the wall and sank to the ground. He watched Lisa watching the gun. Something in her eyes reminded him of someone. She stood over him now. "Are there any bullets left in that thing?" He knew how many there should be, but he checked to be sure. He nodded solemnly. "Just the one in the chamber." He thought about the full clip still on the guard's belt on the bank floor, but there was no way to get it now. "That's good," she said. "We can use it on you." He looked into her eyes again. She was serious. That's when he realized who Lisa reminded him of. That dark hair, those eyes that held secrets he would never be able to understand. He'd seen them before in Fatima, the first girl he ever loved. Speedy stepped between them again. The baseball bat hung limply at his side. "You're not shooting my friend," he said, his Mexican accent slightly thicker than usual. Because I published this story originally as a blog, I also wrote articles which were nonfiction to go between the chapters, and now that I've assembled it into a book, some of them are still there. Like, for example, mentioning that nobody actually owns the copyright to the original Night of the Living Dead. They put a copyright notice on the print of the film, but that was on the title card under the original title, Night of the Flesh Eaters. The film distributor looked back and realized that there already was a movie called The Flesh Eaters, so they couldn't use that one. And at the last minute, they changed the title. But nobody ever put a copyright bug on the new title card. So the movie went out like that, now the entire film is in the public domain. You can watch it for free online, you can remix it, you can do whatever you want, because nobody actually is in control of that information. It can spread like zombies, like a virus, totally out of anyone's control. In fact, in 1991, there was an edit done with the same video, but a whole new audio track where people keep talking about ducks and all these awkward kind of racial references because of the context of what's going on in the film. And the title of that one, let me see if I can get it all in one breath. Night of the day, of the dawn, of the sun, of the bride, of the return, of the revenge, of the terror, of the attack, of the evil, mutant, alien, flesh-eating, hellbound, zombified, living dead, part 2. In shocking 2Ds. So later in the story, catching up with our characters, Kaveh is now already a zombie, but because he was a chef when he was alive, some things just kind of stick with you. And he's realized that by eating brains, he's able to recollect some of his life and reconstruct pieces of his own personality. And this is what he decides to do with it. The banquet was carefully laid out, and Kaveh had his first draft of a brain eater's pre-fixed menu. Finger foods of language center, brain stem soup served fresh in the skull, a garden salad topped with crumbled picnic memories and Roquefort cheese dressing, potatoes au gratin layered with succulent cuts of right hemisphere, spicy peppers and kale topped with tender brain fillet, and for dessert, a slice of chocolate cake from the fridge. Some things never go out of style. Now it was just a matter of waiting for his friend to come back. Kaveh sat on the stool next to where the kitchen island had been and ran his right hand over his injured left shoulder. His arm was moving better than it had that afternoon, even as the bite that had made him a zombie continued to rot. He was tempted to pick at the wound, but there was a noise. The dead body on the floor was moving. Speedy's limbs stretched out in all directions like an angry starfish. His arms flailed convulsively until one palm, then the other, found the floor with a smack. They pushed off, and his rigid torso lifted off the ground. His eyes opened, showing the cold stare of a creature from beyond the grave returning to slaughter and feed on the living. It was time. Time for breakfast, said Kaveh, forcing his best waiter smile. He picked up the first tray from the counter and waved it under Speedy's nose. Speedy's vacant eyes locked onto the bite-sized cuts of brain spread amongst the garnish of green onions. This is the appetizer, said Kaveh, knowing his friend would digest the memory of learning English from one of those cuts. By starting with this, he could spare his newly zombified friend the frustrating combination of internal awareness without the ability to communicate. Speedy snatched at the food and stuffed his mouth with handfuls of pink and gray matter from the tray. He ate ravenously, zombie style, and within a minute, all but the garnish was consumed. Good work, said Kaveh. He stood back to watch for his friend's first signs of awareness. Do you remember anything? He asked. Speedy stood up without acknowledgement and turned his head slowly to scan the room. He didn't know what was happening. It's Father's kitchen, Speedy. Fidel. You died about an hour ago, but it's okay, I cooked all this. Speedy spotted the rest of the meal on the counter and stumbled rigidly in its direction, his hands grasping the air in front of him, his head bobbing randomly off to the sides. Kaveh followed him. There was a lot to take in, but Speedy had always been a good listener. Maybe he didn't remember English yet. Kaveh thought back to the words he picked up during their years working side by side. ¿Recuerdas? He asked, appealing in Speedy's native tongue. But the fresh corpse kept his focus on reaching the counter, groping for the piles of food. Kaveh intercepted him. No. Here, the soup comes next. He turned Speedy by the shoulders to face the severed head, staring off of the counter. Its insides had been hollowed out like a jack-o'-lantern to make room for soup. With a clean removal of the crown, the remains of this random victim had become a strangely appropriate serving dish. Speedy had used to criticize Calde's recipes for their lack of presentation. But in preparing this meal, ideas like that kept coming to him from somewhere. Up there.